understand your needs?
Do you think I'd benefit from bundling my auto and home coverage?
Searching for homes with car dealerships nearby.
Sure, robots listen, but do they understand you? At Farm Bureau Financial Services, we'll help you save money and time by bundling your auto and home insurance. Find an agent at fbfs.com/protect. It's your future. Let's protect it. Farm Bureau Property and Casualty Insurance Company, Western Agricultural Insurance Company.
With our roots in northern Utah, Holy Cross Hospital has a legacy of caring to help every person be whole and healthy. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
At Holy Cross Hospital, we're honored to carry the legacy of our namesake and equally honored to care for northern Utah's vibrant communities. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
Have you been waiting to buy a car until interest rates go down? I'm Josh Osborne with Volkswagen Southtown. With our rate cut sale, now there's no reason to wait.
Get 3.9 for 5 years at Volkswagen Southtown on any new car. And we have as low as 1.9 on used cars. Get the car you really want, like the Jetta, Tiguan, Taos, Atlas, or ID4 EV.
Save thousands in interest at Volkswagen Southtown, Utah's #1 Volkswagen dealer. Start shopping at VWSouthtown.com.
Claim since 2022. Financing through VCI on select models OAC. See dealer for details.
If you've got a honey-do list with electrical, plumbing, heating, or air conditioning projects on it, Any Hour Services can help. Call Any Hour Services, electrical, plumbing, heating, and air. anyhourservices.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We have a crash in Midvale, northbound I-15. It's about halfway between 90th and 7200 South, and it is on the main flow of the freeway. Vehicles are to the left and to the right at about 8500 South, and that's what's backing traffic to the Southtown Mall at 106 South. The Utah Symphony's Deer Valley Music Festival in Park City features Ben Folds, Leanne Rimes, the Beach Boys, and more. June 30th through August 4th in Park City at DeerValleyMusicFestival.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a chance of thunderstorms today and tomorrow with a high around 84. It warms up through the rest of the week with highs in the upper 90s by Monday. Right now, 74 degrees, partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
This is Marty Carpenter sitting in today for Boyd Matheson, and it's a pleasure to be along with you for the ride for the next couple of hours, talking about, everything that's going on in Utah politics, national politics, and despite the fact that we're in sort of what should be a really, really slow part of the calendar, there are a few things going on that I think we are going to have a fun time diving in on and really dissecting, picking it apart a little bit. Let's start with this. When you are running for office, one of the first things you have to do is figure out what it is that's motivating you to run. What is your big driver? And then from that, you can also start to figure out, what's your message? How do I say what I care about? How do I say what I stand for in a way that is going to get people to want to vote for me, ultimately? And that is a little bit of a different approach if you are a challenger or if you're running for an open seat or if you are an incumbent. If you're an incumbent, you have to be in a position to run on your record to some extent. You have to be able to say, this is what I told you I would do. This is what I have done. Now here's what I want to get done in the future. And that's what you kind of lay out for the electorate. So an interesting question then for our incumbent president of the United States, Joe Biden, trying to figure out what is he going to run on. And the president has essentially made his decision. Today, President Biden says he is fully embracing Bidenomics, tying his future as president to the United States economy, for better or for worse. Here he was in Chicago today talking about the Biden economy.
Bidenomics is about building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. This vision is a fundamental break from the economic theory that has failed America's middle class for decades now. It's called trickle-down economics.
All right, so quick take. It seems a little risky for a president to attach himself to the economy, considering the way I like to put it is the most effective yard sign, campaign sign, is the one that's attached to every corner gas station. And I drove by the gas station by my house today in Kaysville, and unleaded gas was $3.97 a gallon. And just a little while ago, it was $4.19 a gallon. Within the last 2 weeks, it was $4.19. So it's come down a lot to just get to $3.97. That's not usually the type of yard campaign sign that you want out there if you're running on your economic record. But, hey, President Reagan ran on the economy when the economy wasn't great after his first term, right? He was trying to fix what had been the inflation through the Ford and Carter years and interest rates at the north of 12%. Bill Clinton did it with Clintonomics. Everyone's picking this kind of word, Reaganomics, Clintonomics, Bidenomics. We got to figure out a better way to come up with some good names. So what's the thinking behind this for the president? Is this a good political strategy, or could it sink him before things even get going? Even though we still have a long way to go, that sign that says $4 a gallon for gas would have to come down a lot for it to suddenly be seen as a huge positive in time for the 2024 election. Adam Cancran is the White House correspondent for Politico. I want to bring him in on this. Adam, this strategy that the president has decided on today, let's start here. To most Americans, and maybe also to the president and his team, what does the Biden team hope Bidenomics means, and what does it probably mean to a lot of the country right now?
Yeah, hi, Marty, and it's great to be with you. I think you're getting right at the core question here of how exactly this administration wants to brand what it's trying to do on the economy here. And I think, in short, essentially what Bidenomics is, or what the White House would like it to be, is an all-encompassing kind of belief and policies that get at using the muscle of the federal government, whether that's influence or federal funding, to revive and reshape the economy. And what officials keep bringing us back to is, look where we were in terms of 2020, mired in the pandemic, deep in a recession, and look at the both investment, right, and policies that have now gotten the economy to a point where, yes, inflation remains an issue, right? Yes, to your point, gas prices are still too high. But at the same time, unemployment is near record low, near 40-year lows. Wages are up. And even as inflation has come down, we haven't really seen a real cratering in a lot of that job growth and a lot of those kind of positive signs. So this is essentially a rebranding to say, look at all the good parts and, have that kind of outweigh a little bit of the concerns that are still underlying those when it comes to inflation, when it comes to gas prices, and the things that, still worry folks day to day.
Yeah, that's, I guess, the question that jumps out to me is you're saying, I think rightfully, hey, they're trying to say, and even from the clip we played from the president, this is about building it from the middle class out and putting the middle class first. But the middle class, more so than almost anybody in the country, are the people most impacted by eggs suddenly being $9 a carton, gas being $4 a gallon. It just seems like it's going to be a really tough sell in a lot of parts of the country, including parts of the electoral map that they're really going to need. Do you look at this, or is this sort of seen broadly as a really big risk to say, here's one that we know people have been impacted on economically, and you're going to sort of double down on that? Just talk to us a little bit about the size of risk that they're maybe taking by choosing this as their primary issue.
Absolutely. I mean, it is politically, especially, it is a huge risk. And even if you look at how Biden talks about it, right, even in his speech today, he made sure to make the point that, this isn't a victory lap. This is saying that we've come a long way and we essentially still have a long way to go. And I think that's how you're going to see the White House talk about it. There's a few calculations, though, I think, behind tying Biden so directly to the economy. One, for an incumbent president, they get tied to the state of the economy whether they like it or not, right? So that's happening, and it's at this point just a matter of how you talk about it. And two, there has been a lot of frustration inside the White House about the term Bidenomics being used by conservatives to refer to anything that's bad about the economy. And this is less of a new idea than an attempt to reclaim that word Bidenomics, reclaim how people broadly talk about the economy, and try to get people to focus on some of the good things. But it is a huge risk. I mean, even if you take the argument that we're in a good spot, a good and stable spot in the economy, it's always tricky to try to run this, this kind of triumphant lap here when the economy is closer to a peak than a valley. Who knows what could happen in the 16 months until Election Day.
Yeah, if there's anything we've learned over the last several years, it's with a lot of time between now and the election, there's a lot of things that can happen for sure. I wonder about this from like the Republican perspective. If you're the Republican frontrunner right now in Donald Trump, if you are another one of the candidates who has thrown his or her hat in the ring, if you're Nikki Haley, if you're Ron DeSantis, how loud were the high fives in those campaign headquarters when the Biden team decided that the economy is what they wanted to lead out on? Like, do they look at that and think like, yes, bring it on, or would they be perplexed by it at all? What do you think their reaction was?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a little bit of enthusiasm on the Republican side, mainly because, look, if you look historically, Republicans have always been more trusted by the public to handle the economy. Even if you look at polling now, recent polling shows that Donald Trump, who was in office during the pandemic and the deep recession as a result of it, still rates as more trusted in handling the economy than Joe Biden does. And that's a deficit that both sides are very aware of. Republicans think they can use this to their advantage. They already have a lead on it. Now it's just about kind of maintaining that. But Democrats also believe, and especially the White House believes, that the only way to make up that deficit is to continue talking about the economy, to really lean in and change people's minds and say, look at the good things that we've gotten done over the last couple of years. You're seeing a lot of talk about the implementation now of legislative accomplishments of the last couple of years. That is a big part of the strategy in closing that gap. So both sides kind of see some advantages here. And in a way, for us, it's going to be really interesting to see when Republicans and Democrats are going head to head on arguably the biggest factor in the 2024 election.
Yeah, well, for now, it's darn the torpedoes, I guess, is the way they're going about it. We'll see how that plays out as a strategy. And in any political campaign, you're going to have to adjust your strategy as you go along, for sure. But an interesting, thanks so much for your time and your insight.
Who no longer practices medicine, last year renewed her nursing license just to keep her mind active and her professional identity intact. Retirement after 65 was for dinosaurs. Business and government need to realize that most of the current generation will work one way or another into their 70s and 80s. Work done right can enhance the quality of life. Enhance the quality of your life with an MBA from Utah State University. Go to utahstatemba.com. I'm Scott Hammond. Hope to see you in one of our classes.
Guys, did you know your testosterone affects everything in your system, including how you feel and perform every day? Right now, Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City will check your testosterone for free. Knowing your T levels is the first step in understanding if you have low T. Your testosterone level impacts your energy, libido, sleep, weight, hair loss, mood, and even ED. Maintaining an appropriate T level can change your whole life. Most men start to see changes in their hormone levels in their 30s. Experience and results matter. So what are you waiting for? Get your T levels checked today by local, experienced, and trusted men's health experts. They've helped thousands of men since 2011. They're so confident they can help you, they even guarantee it. Call Revive today and schedule your free testosterone test, free exam, and free consultation. Call Revive Men's Health at 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Attention smart homeowners. You don't have to fall for flashy promises and companies that don't even prove their work. At Your Service Pros uses third-party verification software called MeasureQuick to ensure your new HVAC system is installed correctly. This ultimate game changer in the HVAC industry lets you, the homeowner, have proof of how your system was installed. At Your Service Pros utilizes our Bluetooth tools to upload all of your system's information into MeasureQuick. We rely on data-driven insights to properly commission, optimize, and fine-tune your HVAC system for peak performance, improving your family's comfort, lowering your utility bills, and extending the life of your HVAC system. with rebates and tax credits available totaling more than $7,500 on a dual fuel heating and cooling system. It is now more important than ever that your HVAC system be installed correctly. So call us today at 801-YOUR-PRO. That's 801-YOUR-PRO. Have the peace of mind of saving up to 50% on your new system and knowing it's installed correctly by calling 801-YOUR-PRO.
Where do you go to celebrate Independence Day in a big way without the big budget? Fun, food, a ping pong ball drop with prizes, and of course an incredible fireworks display, a free concert at 7:30, and more. You go to Bear Lake.
She got the blue jeans painted on tight that everybody wants on Saturday night. She got the
Celebrate freedom this year in beautiful Bear Lake with country music star David Nail live. Monday, July 3rd at Heritage Park in Garden City at Bear Lake. Bring your blankets, bring your lawn chairs. Activities start at 4. The free concert starts at 7:30. Yes, it's free. Food, fun, and fireworks. And live music from country music star David Nail. Monday, July 3rd. For lodging and more information, go to bearlake.org.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, public health authorities worried about malaria spreading in the South. Here in Utah, less of a concern, although it is conceivable. Second, 90 million years ago, there was a species of marine dinosaur chomping fish in what is now Utah. And third, wildfire smoke is affecting air quality across large areas of the United States. Right now, 74 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
All right, Marty Carpenter in for Boyd Matheson today. And boy, I was thinking about this earlier in the day. Do you remember back when the Affordable Care Act, when Obamacare was passed back in 2010, and then it ended up going through a ton of controversy and then was upheld by the Supreme Court in 2012? Hard to believe that's been like almost 11 years now. So here we are, more than a decade later. And I was thinking about like how much has changed, if anything, since then. And I found myself just thinking about the fact that most American workers still get their health care coverage through their employers today. In fact, I read this new survey that's out that says that businesses and employees are actually pretty happy with the way it works now and the way it's kind of always worked for a very long time in our country, with businesses being able to offer healthcare coverage and employees getting that through their employer. In fact, the new survey, just a couple of numbers from that I'll point out. More than 180 million Americans have access to coverage through their employers or their parents' employers' plan. 63% are what they would say are highly satisfied with their coverage. Nearly 70% say that healthcare coverage is important to their decision in accepting a job, and 80% say it's important to their decision in staying at a job. So it's something that businesses use and use effectively for the most part to take care of their employees and to incentivize them to remain as part or become part of their team. A majority, in fact, say that their coverage meets not just their physical healthcare needs, but their mental healthcare needs as well, which I thought was kind of interesting because that's something that's really wasn't on the radar as much back in 2010 or 2012. But I was thinking about it, and I was interested to see how it's working for Utah workers, where nearly 2 million people have healthcare coverage through their employer. In our state of 3 million people, about 2/3 get their coverage through their employer, through their spouse's employer, through their parents' employer. So how is it working for Utah businesses, right? That's a large number of people, 2 out of every 3. Want to bring in Todd Bingham, who is the president and CEO of the Utah Manufacturers Association, because he works with a lot of businesses who have to offer healthcare coverage. Big businesses, small businesses. We have big manufacturers and smaller manufacturers in our state. Todd, thanks for taking some time to discuss this with us today.
You bet, Marty. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so I've got a couple numbers out here, like almost 2 million people covered by employer insurance in Utah. That's a big number, right? That really jumps out to me. You work with businesses of all sizes. What do you hear from your association members about the importance of being able to offer health insurance as a benefit?
Well, I think you hit a very important note there when you started out with it's kind of how we've always been in the state, is that it's a kind of a part of your employment. Utah has a history of being very low unemployment. Right now we're like 2.8, right, which means it gets tougher and tougher all the time to find good talent and to keep those individuals. And so we use it certainly as an opportunity. Manufacturers are saying it's a key part of how you find the individuals to work in the industry. And manufacturing is the second highest paying wage in the state, and yet manufacturing companies still use it as a critical piece of recruiting and finding talent.
Yeah. Retention's a big part of that as well, right? And people think of that, I think, when you say retention, that, hey, we have a good healthcare plan, that's a reason to stay and work here. And I'm sure that's part of it. Another part of it is keeping your workforce healthy, right? You offer health insurance as an employer in part because you want people to be able to go see the doctor when they need to and get healthy so they can be productive when they're at work.
Yeah, and having that coverage for your family, if you're in the manufacturing industry, and knowing that your family is covered and has a good plan, options for good plans, and plans that meet your needs as an individual, as an employee, and your family as well. And then a side that you mentioned there, which is mental health as well. And we do help our companies with some options for mental health, which is ever increasingly even more important. You talk about culture, Marty, and I think that's really what it is how do you create a culture inside of your business that encourages those team members, because that's what they really are. We refer to them as employees, but team members, part of your team, to stay and be productive parts of your company, and it helps drive the economy and provide great living wage jobs, and health insurance coverage is a huge part of that.
Yeah. With manufacturing, I wonder, when you mentioned the word culture, and I think that's such an important thing to touch on, Todd, that when you're trying to build a culture, particularly in a manufacturing setting, so much of that is centered around safety. I mean, there's, you do safety as an emphasis in an office, but there's only so much of an injury you can generally get in an office, but not as much the case in a manufacturing type of environment. So I wonder, one, you're trying to create a culture of safety, and you tell people about being safe and following the rules and having protections in place. But then when something does go wrong, to know that you're there to take care of them, to make sure they have the coverage they need. And, and I guess in some extreme cases, the mental health coverage that people who've worked around with them who may have, seen something would need, that's part of building that culture as well.
Yeah, the average manufacturing company in the state of Utah is around 50 employees. We know of the very large manufacturing companies, and there's certainly a number of those. But again, the average company is 50 employees. So when you're talking about healthcare coverage in general for manufacturing, it is small organizations and small companies. And so those team members, those employees become like family. And offering good health coverage is part of what manufacturers want to do in those small environments, because they get to know those employees much more on a personal level, and providing that good coverage is important. And then again, on the mental health side of it, we partner with a group of ours called Blue Novus that is just phenomenal in terms of providing options to your employees to look at how to address some of the challenges in today's world, whether it be grieving or whether it be loss or suicide prevention, any of those types of things that sometimes we don't think about but are critical in helping our employees remain healthy, both physically and mentally, and providing them the resources that they need.
Yeah. As you've talked to specific members of your association, is there anything that they've pointed out to say, this is why it's really helpful for our company? Could you give us a specific to a business example?
Yeah, I mean, we have an association health plan, an AHP, within our organization. So we've got a large number of companies that have that opportunity to look at different plans, different programs, different deductibles, things that meet their specific needs. And then I think that's critical to be able to tweak it to whatever the organization needs. Rate increases is certainly a huge part of this with our program, and being able to have companies look at low digit increases in their health insurance costs annually versus significant increases. And those costs are large, and companies want to provide that coverage, but being able to have options to provide to small manufacturers is critical. And again on the mental health side, we had a recent company that had an incident there, operate with an employee that unfortunately took their own life, and we pointed them in the direction of one of the mental health options with some videos and some podcasts and things on grieving and loss, and trying to help a small employer get the resources that they need to be able to have that help for 20, 30 employees that might be going through a difficult time. And so those are important things to helping us continue to get up every day, have manufacturers drive the economy, make the product that we use every day, and sometimes we work that in a kind of a larger sense, I think.
I appreciate the insight. Todd Bingham, President and CEO of the Utah Manufacturers Association. Thanks for your work with those who are building awesome things in our state. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Todd Bingham, President and CEO of the Utah Manufacturers Association. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to look at a recent decision by the Supreme Court to reject a controversial legal theory brought by North Carolina Republicans. We'll get into that after this.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. A new study confirms Utah has the oldest set of mosasaur fossils ever found in North America. KSL News Radio's Adam Small has details.
The ocean-bound creature dominated the water more than 60 million years ago, and scientists are learning more about them from fossils found at Glen Canyon National Recreation Area.
Most of what we knew about mosasaurs were from specimens from Kansas, which are much younger rocks, in northern Europe.
Mosasaur expert Michael Polson of Southern Methodist University says the 94-million-year-old Utah fossils are shedding more light on how they evolved before they went extinct.
And mosasaurs started out as gigantic lizards before they evolved into apex ocean predators that dominated the oceans for millions of years. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Volodymyr Zelensky will remain as president of Ukraine until martial law is lifted in that country. U.S. State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel says the election set for next year has been delayed.
We continue to stay in close touch with our Ukrainian partners. It's also an opportunity, I'd remind you, that martial law is only in place because Russia continues to wage a full-scale illegal war against Ukraine and its people.
And your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down 125 points on the day right now. The NASDAQ, though, just barely ahead at 13 points up. KSL weather, looks like there's a prospect of another thunderstorm before things dry out. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
How's the water where you live? Depending on where you live in Utah, the water coming out of your tap might be really hard and not taste very good. It might be leaving spots on your glasses and shower and leaving your skin dry.
We want you to know our friends at Superior Water and Air have solutions for your home and your business, by the way. They have the best, most efficient water softeners in Utah, but not only that, they also have water purifiers that will give your family crystal clear drinking water.
And if you're still using those big unsanitary water bottles in your office, let Superior hook you up to a more convenient, trusted water system.
When you think of Superior Water and Air, think of solutions for everything in your home, from plumbing to water heaters to furnaces and air conditioning, and of course those great home standby generators.
To keeping the air in your home as healthy as possible, especially during these inversions. I had Superior install 2 things in my home that have helped us so much. We have an air purifier and a humidifier hooked right up to our furnace.
Call Superior today, 974-9090, or go to superiorwaterandair.com.
At Intermountain Primary Children's Hospital, we made a bold promise to build the nation's model health system for children. Join us in realizing our vision for the future of pediatric care. So together, we can expand primary children's impact and ensure every child has access to the right care at the right place at the right time. For a century, Primary Children's has kept the child first and always. Help us continue to do so for the next 100 years. To get involved, visit primarypromise.org.
We're going abroad for the first time in years. To Spain.
So we started using Babbel.
And started learning Spanish fast.
With Babbel, you can start having conversations in another language in just 3 weeks.
¿Cómo te llamas?
¿Cómo te llamas?
When you learn a language, you want to actually use it. Babbel is designed with that goal in mind.
In just 3 weeks, we're starting to have conversations in Spanish. Gracias, Babbel.
Babbel, language for life. Now try Babbel for free at Babbel.com. That's BABBEL.com.
The UACPA supports certified professional accountants in Utah through ongoing professional education and leadership development for an ever-changing financial world. Find a CPA at uacpa.org.
We have emergency traffic now, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. Here's Ricky Meeks.
It's a crash with possible injuries, and it is affecting both north and southbound I-15 near 5600 South in Roy. It looks like it actually occurred on the southbound side of I-15, a rollover with a possible vehicle fire in this same vicinity. And even though we do have crews on the scene, we're waiting for more emergency crews to arrive in Weber County. Again, it is the HOV lanes blocked in both directions for Taylorsville drivers. We also have a crash blocking a right lane of the main flow and the on-ramp to northbound I-215's West Belt at 4700 South. Fill up your bucket list in Box Elder County. History, recreation, and wildlife, along with excellent dining and shopping await you. Find out more at visitboxeldercounty.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a chance of thunderstorms today and tomorrow with a high around 84. It warms up through the rest of the week with highs in the upper 90s by Monday. 75 degrees and partly cloudy right now at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd's America's voice of reason. I'm just the voice of reason for now. I don't know. Maybe I'm not a voice of reason at all, but it's good to be with you today. Marty Carpenter sitting in for Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources. Yesterday, the Supreme Court of the United States rejected a legal theory titled the Independent State Legislature Theory. The court was hearing a case about election laws in North Carolina, and Republicans, primarily in that state, were using this theory to argue their case. So what are the details? What are the ramifications that this decision from the Supreme Court could have on elections across the country? Let's bring in Matt Germer. He is a resident elections fellow for the governance program at R Street Institute. Matt, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Marty, for having me. Pleasure to be here.
All right, 6-3 was the decision, if I have it right in my head. Give us the brief overview. What is the independent state legislature theory, and how did it make its way before the Supreme Court?
So the independent state legislature's theory is this idea that comes from Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, where state legislatures are given the power to set the times, places, and manner of congressional elections. And the argument is, well, if that power is given to state legislatures, their own state courts and their own state constitution doesn't bind them, doesn't create any restrictions for them. The legislature is free to do whatever they want. And in this case, North Carolina's state legislature drew some maps for their redistricting project. The court did not like those maps, threw out the maps and drew their own, and the legislature said, hey, that violates this idea that we are calling this independent state legislature theory, and they took their case to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said, no way, that's not a thing.
Yeah, so shorter version of that might be the idea, not that you weren't perfectly succinct, of course, Matt, but the shorter version of that might be checks and balances apply, is essentially the way of saying that, yeah, you get to set it, but that doesn't mean you're not subject to review from state courts.
That's right. The way I think of it is that state constitutions are the things that give life to state legislatures in the first place. So anything a state legislature does needs to comport with that state constitution, including the creation of election laws.
Yeah. So what specifically can you tell us about the reasons the court gave for rejecting this idea?
So it largely comes from that point I just made, that state constitutions create the legislatures, so the legislatures are bound by state constitutions. In this case, there are a couple details maybe worth noting. One is this big partisan overlay that was in place. Republicans controlled the legislature, but at the time, Democrats controlled the state Supreme Court, and they didn't like that the maps that the Republicans drew so heavily favored the Republicans in the state. And so they threw it out. I think in this case, the Supreme Court wasn't addressing those maps. They weren't looking, the U.S. Supreme Court, they weren't looking at whether those maps were fair. They were only looking at whether or not the state Supreme Court had a role in the process. And they said, yes, they do. And they said, in this case, we're going to send the case back to North Carolina. As it turns out, North Carolina's already taken the case back for themselves, and they've blessed the maps that the legislature has drawn. A new Republican Supreme Court is in place now. And so largely everything's going back to status quo.
Okay, so in North Carolina in specific then, they've set it back to basically their maps aren't going to change. That was a follow-up question I was going to ask is what happens now in North Carolina? Are there other states right now in the country where this could have some kind of impact, or is this essentially clarifying the playing field going forward?
It's a good question. I think what this case really comes down to is what could have happened if the court had decided differently. The court largely sided on status quo, that the state legislature draws maps, they create election laws. For the most part, there aren't really problems with that, but if there are problems, the state Supreme Court can step in and evaluate those laws according to the state's constitution. If the court had decided differently, that's where a lot of the big grand theories of what this independent state legislatures could mean. It could have meant that state legislatures could create whatever election laws they wanted, regardless of what their state constitutions or their state courts said. And in this case, in an overwhelming 6-3 majority, the court shut down that idea.
Yeah. This, as we've mentioned, started, or the beginning point for it was North Carolina. Was this an idea that had started to sort of spread to other parts of the country, saying, hey, we obviously got to keep an eye on this, because if the court had ruled in a different way, it certainly was going to have what I think you could say is a greater impact, right? It would have been a bigger change had the decision gone the other way. But were there a lot of parts of the country keeping an eye on it beyond just sort of general interest that things could change if the decision went differently? Were they watching this to say, hey, this could really shift the way we go about drawing our boundaries, which, for a lot of these states really isn't for another decade?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's important to reflect as well. This isn't just about drawing the line. In the 2020 election, we've heard a lot of theories about why Donald Trump lost. There is one state that comes to mind, Pennsylvania, where the executive department and the judicial agent and the judicial branch came together to create the rules for how the election would be run. They largely cut out the legislature. And depending on the outcome of the case, the legislature was looking around and saying, hey, hold on. I thought the power to create the rules was given to us. And so, that's one of those states that was very closely watching how this case came out. And for what it's worth, Chief Justice John Roberts, who wrote the opinion for the court here, did note there might be times where the state Supreme Court does go too far. That wasn't at play here in North Carolina, but he left the door open for ensuring that you don't get state Supreme Courts who go far too far in taking the power from the state legislatures.
Yeah. Is the reaction to this, has it been about what I think most people would expect, that people say, okay, we're generally in favor of checks and balances and having a system where, hey, it's the legislature draws the lines, people can challenge those, the state court figures it out, and we all get to a good outcome ultimately. I'm just wondering what nationally the reaction has been, or even if in North Carolina, what the reaction has been to this. Was it surprising to people that this is the way the decision ended up, or was it sort of assumed that it would go this way?
I think that depends upon where you get your news. One thing that was fascinating me about this case in the lead up to the decision was that we had folks on the far left, folks on the far right, both convinced that the court was going to come out in the other direction and that state legislatures would be able to do everything from not just set the rules with no pushback, but maybe even overturn election results after the election. And one thing that really stuck out to me about this case is none of the justices went that far as to say that state courts can never intercede. It was really those were far-fetched theories, and I think one of the things I'm excited for about this case is that it really put to bed some of that conspiracy mongering on the extremes of our political spectrum.
Yeah, really interesting. I think the decision would have had much bigger impacts, or at least more chaos involved had it gone the other way. This almost seems like for a lot of folks kind of taking a Well, okay, that makes sense. That yes, there has to be some oversight by the courts within the state, and we have to have elections and such go about the way that they have previously. So I appreciate the insight, Matt. That's really helpful for us. Really appreciate you being with us. Matt Germer, resident elections fellow with the governance program at the R Street Institute, has been our guest on Inside Sources. It just seems like had the decision gone the other way, there would have been a whole lot more involved that would have been less predictable, and now we're sort of into that. Okay, things are the way that they've always been for a number of years. Really interesting to see how it's played out and where the court came down on this. We're back with more on Inside Sources after this.
Summer celebrations are almost here.
You can light off your own fireworks until 11 p.m. on the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, midnight on the 4th.
And the fireworks stands are open.
Even if it's green, it can still burn.
Don't burn down Utah. And come here for updates on safety and restrictions. KSL News Radio, your summertime fun companion for news.
Are you or someone you take care of as their caregiver living with Alzheimer's disease? This study just might be for you. Consider participating in a Therus clinical trial exploring a novel repair and regenerative approach to Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City is looking for people with mild to moderate dementia, 55 to 85 years old. A consistent caregiver or support person is necessary for the conduct of this study. This study is a late-stage clinical study of an investigational drug for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research has over 30 years' experience with clinical trials. They conduct their business with professionalism, efficiency, and integrity. Contact Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City today. Again, call Pantheon Clinical Research today at 385-281-0550. That's 385-281-0550. Or go to pantheonclinical.com. That's pantheonclinical.com.
Emergency traffic on KSL News Radio, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. We have a crash with injuries affecting both directions of travel on I-15 in Weber County. This is near 5600 South in Roy. A lot of emergency crews are on the scene there. The HOV lane in both north and southbound directions of I-15 are blocked to traffic. On the southbound side, there's actually 2 left lane closed. On the northbound side, 1 HOV lane closed. The problem is we now have heavy stop-and-go delays. Southbound delays are well through Riverdale. Northbound delays are into Clearfield. You want to consider an alternate route and avoid this spot of I-15. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing. We've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that? Meditation?
I'm recommending the Ooma cloud phone system with auto attendant and more than 50 features.
Ooma?
Yep. Switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Now you're feeling it. Find small business calm at ooma.com/radio. That's OOMA.com/radio.
Hi, we're Comparion Insurance Agency. Right now you're thinking, Comparion, never heard of them. We know. We also know that you have no idea that Comparion Insurance agents are local and provide expert advice. So to help it stick, we're going to say local agent 4 times in the next 15 seconds. Ready? Go. Our local agents know you and your community. Our local agents offer insurance from top carriers. Our local agents have minty fresh breath.
Find us at ComparionInsurance.com. Comparion Insurance Agency. Local agents. Expert advice.
And there's number 4.
If you want a heating and air company that uses third-party verification of their work, that is one of the highest rated on both Google and Yelp, then call At Your Service Pros at 801-YOUR-PRO.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio is your window to the outside world, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
Register for breaking news updates by texting the word news to the Cypress Credit Union KSL text line at 57500.
I'm Andy Farnsworth from KSL News Radio.
And I'm Kellyanne Halverson.
And we're hosts of KSL's Fan Effect podcast.
That's Fan Effect with an E.
We're excited to share with you our knowledge
and arguments
on everything pop culture and fandom, featuring movie and television reviews, pop culture deep dives into video games, cosplay, fandom events, and more. Listen regularly on your favorite podcast platform at kslnewsradio.com, kslpodcasts.com, or on the KSL News Radio app.
And remember, that's Fan Effect with an E.
All the talks we've had over the years, including what you've told me about not using alcohol and other drugs, they stick with me. And believe it or not, they really do make a difference, especially at times that matter most.
Hey, want a drink?
No thanks, I'm good. So thank you, Dad, for talking and preparing me for what's ahead.
Thank you for talking.
For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the woman accused of poisoning her husband with fentanyl is now facing a lawsuit from his family. Second, a 90-million-year-old fossil is telling us more about a prehistoric predator that lived in what is now Utah. And third, there will be no election for president of Ukraine next year. It's been delayed until martial law is lifted in that country. Right now, 75 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Back on Inside Sources, Marty Carpenter sitting in today for Boyd Matheson, who is out. I don't know if you were able to, I don't know if anyone could have missed this. It was quite the intrigue we had over the weekend. The coup, the attempted coup, nobody was really quite sure. We were all trying to figure out what was going on in Russia and in Ukraine, and if this was sort of the end or the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin. And I know as I sat there trying to make sense of it, reading through the stories, I thought, you know who would know about this is Jon Huntsman, former governor of Utah, former ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Russia, because I've had the chance to sit down with him from time to time and hear his thoughts on things happening in Russia or in China, where he was also the U.S. ambassador. And boy, that's a mind that really just gets what's going on over there. And he actually spoke to CNN and gave some of his thoughts on this. And I think it's something really worthwhile for us to go through. So Governor Huntsman has, again, that background to really understand what's happening in Russia. He sat down with CNN anchor Caitlin Collins to talk about the recent coup attempt for Vladimir Putin.
Putin's uncontested leadership is over. So I don't say that hyperbolically. I say for 23 years, Putin has been uncontested in terms of his ability to call the shots as the final arbiter of all decisions in Russia. So what else has happened through this whole Yevgeny Prigozhin episode? Putin has been humiliated. That's not happened many times in his career. We're not going to know in the days and weeks and even the months ahead what the likely outcome for Vladimir Putin will be. He still controls the state. He controls the security apparatus. He's got more bombs and guns than anybody else. But I'm here to tell you, I think we're witnessing the final saga of Vladimir Putin.
So Collins asked the former Utah governor and former Russian ambassador to Russia about the deal that ended the coup, because it was like all heading toward a march on Moscow. And then, as you recall, boom, it's just sort of stopped. And the president of Belarus mediated a deal between Prigozhin and Putin. And here is what Governor Huntsman had to say about that.
Vladimir Putin doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive. It shows the hypocrisy of the system. You've got people in prisons throughout Russia who have committed minor offenses against the state and against Putin. And here you have Yevgeny Prigozhin, who launches a 5,000-person strike. It took the dictator in Belarus to step in and stop this, who probably represented the greatest existential threat to Putin and the Russian state, and he's let go. So the hypocrisy that's built into the Russian mindset at the governance level is just breathtaking.
Breathtaking, and probably doesn't go without being noticed by the average Joe in Russia. An interesting way to think about that as well. Governor Huntsman, also spoke about the next steps that Vladimir Putin is taking to exert control over the region after this event.
Putin is a master at trickery. He's a master at leverage. He's a master at deceit. So he's putting nuclear weapons in Belarus. So where are those weapons likely to be aimed toward? Well, probably Poland, because what he wants to do, he wants to freak out NATO. He wants to freak out the people in Poland by thinking that something could occur. So he's a master at these kinds of tactics. Not that they're going to be used at the end of the day, although you have to take those threats extremely seriously. Putin, after 23 years, knows every trick in the book.
I'm sure that's an accurate statement, that he knows every trick in the book. And also, when you say he's masterful not only at deceit, it's masterful at holding on to power, which I think is an interesting element of this as well. Here's the next thing that Governor Huntsman had to say.
I think what the United States needs to really focus on is how are we prepared as a country to deal with post-Putin Russia? Do we have lifelines out to some of the people who could emerge as leaders? Do we even know who they are? Well, I can tell you I spent a lot of time running the embassy in Moscow trying to get answers to these questions, and they're very elusive because there's no bench in politics in Russia. There's no there. And so for the United States and for Europe, for NATO, for Central Asia, who comes next? And I don't think it's premature to be talking about that. It's going to be an extremely important question to address.
That's a really interesting point to bring up, I think, that we know the devil we're dealing with. We don't know who the next devil may be, or even if that next person will be one you would classify on the devil side versus the angel side. I think you've got a pretty good indication, but really interesting to think about the implications of not knowing who the successor is, not knowing who's next up, and then how does that shift the relationship between Russia and the rest of the world, and Russia and the United States specifically. Finally, one last clip from Governor Huntsman. This coup attempt has shaken Putin's domestic support, as the Russian people did little to come to their leader's defense, despite the speech he gave once it was over, saying that all the people of Russia had rallied to his defense. They didn't really come to his defense when all of this happened. And former Ambassador Huntsman talked about the different dynamic in Russia going into an election year next year.
Putin has to declare that he will be a candidate for re-election in March of 2024. Now, he's already changed the Constitution such that he can run 2 or 3 more times. I was in Moscow in 2018 during his last election. He won by 77% of the vote. Yes, it's rigged and all of that, but I have to say that Putin's also a pretty good politician and campaigner. He promises things, he delivers stuff. That's when the hypersonic weapons were on full display, the nuclear torpedoes aimed at the United States. The environment then in 2018 was a lot more auspicious for Vladimir Putin. The stuff that has happened since 2018 and since the war began is completely different. And so the months ahead, as he anticipates November, when he has to declare as a candidate, and remember there are 150 million good citizens in Russia, their voices are going to matter at some point as well.
Really interesting insight from our former governor, who has been as close to this as anybody who has any touch to our state, and really as close to this as anybody in the United States has been. I think it's a really interesting point that there's an element of sort of distraction to this, and I mean that in the sense not that there's misdirection for the rest of the world, though that certainly could be an element of this, but the element of distraction in that before this happened, Putin sort of had that full control of the state and was unchallenged. You heard the former ambassador, former Utah Governor John Huntsman mentioning that he was unchallenged, and now that foundation is shaken. That comes with a cost to one's personal attention. So if you're looking at this and saying Putin had goals that he was trying to accomplish on the world stage and what he was trying to accomplish in Ukraine specifically, once something like this happens, and now not only does he, you would think, have to be a little nervous that this was just the first of something else that may happen along these lines, but that it shakes the support or the illusion of support, the control he has over the security apparatus in his country, over those who support him, and shakes that illusion of the broader support that he likes to project that he has, at least, amongst his people there in Russia. How much of a factor is that suddenly, hey, I had everything else in my life on autopilot and I was focused on what I was doing here. I was 100% dedicated to making mischief in Ukraine or in other parts of the world, waging a war, and suddenly you've got to worry about your home base a little bit, something that you may have been able to take for granted, again, if you are Vladimir Putin in this scenario. How much does that shift things for him? And with that destabilization, what opportunities are out there and present now for the United States, for our allies, for countries that just are not friendly to Russia? Every little piece you move on the board changes the board and the strategy all around. Really great to get the insight from our former governor, John Huntsman, who is also the former U.S. ambassador to Russia as well. We're going to take a break and come back with more on Inside Sources, as the NBA Inside Stuff. I turned 14 again. On Inside Sources after this.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. While there is a kind of mosquito capable of transmitting malaria that is found in Utah, experts say the likelihood of an outbreak here is very, very low. Greg White with the Salt Lake Mosquito District says the Anopheles mosquito is rare compared to other species.
And we just don't have a lot of opportunities for mosquitoes to bite infected people and then stay alive for the required 2 weeks and then go bite another person. So the chances of a human-hosted disease like malaria being transmitted in the U.S. are very, very low.
White says other diseases, such as West Nile virus, are found in Utah every year, and the mosquitoes that carry them are much more common. Rebuilding 90th South is one of the bigger projects that UDOT has planned for this summer. It will include replacing the bridge over the Jordan River and adding a lane in each direction from Redwood Road to 7th West. UDOT says that stretch of 90th South carries more than 50,000 cars a day. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A large emergency response in Moore Park, California, near Ventura, where an Amtrak train derailed today. ABC's Alex Stone is in Southern California.
Passengers huddled outside of the derailed train, holding on to their luggage. Firefighters handing out bottles of water to them in the sunshine. The train hit a County of Ventura water truck, slicing it down the middle. Reportedly, nobody was inside of that truck when it was hit. 3 of the Amtrak cars derailed, tipping a bit onto their sides. The number of injured isn't clear. At least one person is believed to have been injured.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down 72 points on the day now. The NASDAQ, though, up 36. And our KSL weather, it looks like there's a prospect for a thunderstorm, but not much. The KSL weather's next. KSL News Time, 2:02.
This summer, the political season heats up.
By August, it'll be time for debates. Can you believe it?
We're planning coverage of the real issues, the important stories that impact how we live.
Listen each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and if you have a drain that's clogged or backed up, after you've tried the plungers and products, the next step usually involves some kind of drain snake or cabling equipment. You see, sometimes the blockage is far enough down the line that you need special equipment that most homeowners just don't have. That's where the Drains Department at Any Hour Services can help. A drain snake can clear most blockages and get the water flowing again, and clearing blocked drains is what our Drains Department does day in and day out. So if you're a homeowner with a drain line that's clogged or backed up and you'd like one of our drain technicians to come and snake the line for you, it's only $29. Yep, you heard that right. Any Hour Services will snake any drain line with normal access for only $29. Sinks, showers, tubs, toilets, floor drains, laundry drains, even that sewer main line that connects to the city. We'll snake any line for just $29. For help with your drain issues, call Any Hour Services at 801-443-7700. You can Google Any Hour Services. You can even schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Don't miss America's Freedom Festival in Utah County, a celebration with a mission to teach the honor and patriotism of our great nation. Take in Utah's largest July 4th Grand Parade, Freedom Days in downtown Provo, Balloon Fest, and Colonial Fest in Orem, followed by the state's biggest fireworks show and concert, Alta Bank Stadium of Fire, featuring Journey. For information, visit freedomfestival.org. freedomfestival.org.
Once again, we have emergency traffic problem up in Roy, and here's Ricky Meese.
This is affecting both Weber and Davis County drivers on I-15. If you are making your way north or southbound, you can expect delays northbound starting in Clearfield, southbound in Ogden. It's due to a crash with injuries near 5600 South in Roy. On the southbound side, we've had two left lanes blocked, and on the northbound side, the HOV lane had been blocked. Looks like they've just opened that up to traffic. However, heavy residual delays continue, and these delays are stop-and-go speeds. Supercharge your savings. UCCU is offering short-term savings options with incredibly high yields, up to 5.5% on short-term certificates. UCCU. Love where you bank. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Our KSL weather, a chance of thunderstorms today and tomorrow with a high around 84. It warms up through the rest of the week with highs in the upper 90s by Monday. Right now, 76 degrees, partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
All right, Marty Carpenter in for Boyd Matheson as we start hour number 2 of the expanded Inside Sources program here on KSL News Radio. As Boyd would like to say, time for us all to dig a little deeper, think a little bigger, explore a little wider, challenge our assumptions a little stronger, and disagree a little better. So let's get down to it. I want to start this hour, just last week, I guess depending on how you're breaking it out, it's Wednesday. So last week around this time, Governor Cox and the World Trade Center Utah and business leaders from our state were on a trade mission across the pond to London and to Paris. These trade missions are an interesting opportunity to highlight the best of what we have to offer in Utah and to expand our economy. That's the idea behind it, at least. We'll get a little more detail on exactly what goes into a trade mission. Our guest is Tiffany Yen-Louis. She's the Chief Marketing Officer for World Trade Center Utah. Tiffany, thanks for taking some time with us today.
Hey, Marty. Thanks for having us.
All right. So you go across the pond, you go back to talk to folks in Paris, and you go back to talk to folks in London. Let's start, though, with the basics. What are we trying to accomplish with a trade mission? Because the Governor Cox, prior to him, Governor Herbert, all of our governors have done this, gone out to other countries to talk about business in Utah. What's the goal when we put these together as a state?
Yeah, so World Trade Center Utah, in partnership with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, we organize the state's trade missions and trade shows. And the purpose is to take Utah business leaders abroad to meet and build relationships and help businesses to find new buyers and investors and partners in new markets.
So it's all about making that connection. I know Lou Kramer, who used to be the head of the World Trade Center, the first president and CEO of the World Trade Center, used to always tell me that the most important distance in international business is that last 3 feet. When you shake somebody's hand, when you look them in the eye, and you build those relationships. So clearly that's important. Maybe this is a question I think would be important to clarify for me and for our audience. How do we pick which countries we want to go talk to and have a trade mission with? What goes into determining where we're headed? Is that simply this is where the governor thinks we should go, or what goes into making that decision?
No, we look at it from a standpoint of what is going to help businesses and where are their needs at this point. Specifically this year, coming off of COVID and getting to international business again and getting businesses on the road again. We looked at Paris and London, looked at Europe as an ideal entry point for Utah businesses to go into. Paris and London are both multi-billion-dollar markets between Utah and Europe because they serve as international hubs for both finance as well as innovation. The UK is Utah's biggest trading partner. Our exports with the region exceeded $7 billion last year. And with France, they're our second largest trading partner in the EU. So with France's 2030 investment plan to transform some of their top industries, there's some ample opportunities for Utah companies to forge innovative and ambitious partnerships in the region.
Yeah. Governor Cox signed a couple of trade pacts with the UK and with France. I wonder what you could tell us about those or why it's important for Utah to have some kind of formal agreement as part of these trips to say, we want to do business, we're open to do business with you, and we hope you'll come do business with us.
Yes, both pacts are a culmination of years of working together in partnership, and we did a letter of intent with the president of France's region Sud while in Paris to establish a partnership between a national park in both regions to exchange best practices in tourism. This letter of intent was spearheaded by Utah's Office of Tourism, and so their team joined us on the ground, joined us as part of the trade mission in both regions, but particularly in Paris, this was an opportunity for both Utah and France to work together and then agree to explore collaboration in other areas, including technology, innovation, and healthcare. In the UK, that was an important memorandum of understanding. We did an MOU with the UK Trade Minister to commit to boost trade and investment between our regions. So more than 10,700 Utahns are employed in the UK and UK subsidiaries, and more than 3,800 Utah jobs are supported by exports to the UK. So these were really important trade pacts to sign and make a commitment to continue working together.
Yeah. When you take Salt Lake or Utah, let's say Salt Lake City in this case, London and Paris, all three of those cities have something in common, or at least will by this time next summer, and that we've hosted the Olympics. Paris is getting ready to host the Olympics in 2024. A lot of construction going on there. All the stuff we're familiar with if you went back to 2001. I'm curious, was there much Olympic talk while we were there? Does that kind of get us into the club to some extent to be able to say, hey, we know what you've been through trying to get ready for the Olympics. We're part of that club too.
Yeah, no, there's definitely an undercurrent and discussion that they're hosting Olympics and have done it. We've done it and are preparing for it. Part of actually the trade mission was the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission joined us on this trade mission. And as part of their time on the ground, we had Department of Natural Resources, Department of Transportation, talking about growth and innovation and speaking with both regions in Paris and London about how do you navigate growth and how do you navigate transportation and in growing communities. Vineyard City was also part of that conversation. They, being one of our largest growing cities in the state, they participated on the trade mission and had part of those conversations as well. And Olympics were absolutely a component of that discussion. It's not only how do you handle growth in a state and a community, but also how do you navigate transportation, high levels of high levels of tourism, specifically as Olympics are coming up for both of us.
Yeah.
And I know Governor's making plans to go back next year to participate with the Olympics and also formulate that relationship. We hope that we'll get it for 2030 or 34, whichever it is, and that decision will be made and signed during the Paris Olympics next year.
Yeah. This trip coincides, or at least overlaps a bit, with the Paris Air Show, which is one of the, if not the biggest air show in the world to show off new technologies and advancements in that area. I wonder to what extent that was a topic of the trip, even though that was not the main point of the trip.
Absolutely. Typically, trade shows and trade missions are two different time periods. This is one of those unique opportunities that we get an overlapping trade event for us. So we had the Paris Air Show that was taking place where we had an individual on our team that was leading 10 Utah aerospace companies to exhibit in the Utah booth. And then the trade mission that was taking place, which started in Paris and made our way over to London. The Paris Air Show, Governor Cox joined us on the opening day and had an opportunity to meet with the businesses that were exhibiting in the Utah booth, met with some of the other states as well. And there were 10 governors, 10 governors from the U.S. who were at the air show that day. Governor Cox met with Northrop Grumman, Hexcel, Boeing, ATI, as a few of those companies. And it was a great opportunity to see what's happening in aerospace and defense, as well as in air mobility. We also had some businesses from the state, Altaport specifically, who was out there speaking and on a panel about air mobility in the future.
Yeah. Tiffany, I've only got about 30 seconds, so maybe I'm throwing too involved of a question at you in that 30 seconds, but do what you can with me here.
Okay.
The UK went through Brexit. They're not part of the European Union anymore, still trying to work out their free trade deal with the U.S. How was that impacting any of the discussions? Does that complicate things a little bit on these trips, or is that the kind of thing where focus on the relationships and we'll iron the rest of it out?
No, it was a great time for us to be on the ground as the UK makes renewed efforts to be open for businesses with the U.S., particularly states like Utah. So there was a conversation around post-Brexit economy and how we can work with them outside of the EU.
So you handled it in less than 30 seconds perfectly. Very nicely done. Tiffany, thanks so much for giving us some insight. I hope you had a wonderful trip to Paris and London. I know it was more work than pleasure, but hopefully you got to enjoy a little bit of Europe as well.
It was a lot of fun, and we can thank Delta for those nonstop flights.
That's right. That's the best.
Like the Paris and London.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right. Tiffany and
Thanks,
Louie,
Marty.
with the World Trade Center, Utah, thanks so much for your time and your insight on this. Coming up, could a new bill introduced in the U.S. House help borrowers ease back into student loan repayments this fall? We'll talk about that next.
Utah needs to replace Representative Chris Stewart.
In this special election, only one person can come out of convention, and that person is Celeste Malloy.
Now we know at least one Republican has made the ballot.
She did get the endorsement from her former boss, Congressman Chris Stewart. She called herself a political dark horse.
Now it's a foot race for a handful of other challengers to collect signatures and make the primary. The drop-dead date is Tuesday the 5th. We'll update the field all this week on KSL News Radio.
Emergency traffic continues on KSL News Radio, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. We've had a rollover crash with injuries affecting both north and southbound I-15. The bad news for southbounders, the left lane is still blocked to traffic, maybe two. It's a little difficult to tell from the camera's angle. But emergency crews are still on the scene, southbound I-15 near 5600 South and Roy, and you have stop-and-go delays now reaching into Ogden at about 31st Street. For northbounders, even though crews are mostly gone, what's left are over to the right shoulder. All lanes of travel are now open, but we still have delays back from 5600 Roy, 5600 South Roy, all the way to 700 South in Clearfield. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
This is Jeff Kaplan, and I am a blue razzmatazz guy. Now, I know maybe you're all about Simply Mango or maybe Tiger's Blood. No judgment, but when it comes to the highly personal decision of your favorite Frazzle flavor, Blue Razzmatazz is my jam. Well, really, it's my slushie. Frazzle, in case you don't know, is a delicious, refreshing slushie sold at convenience stores. Frazzle got its start here in Utah 20 years ago, and now you find Frazzle machines at convenience stores from coast to coast. If you've never tried Frazzle, or even if you're already a fan like me, get one free on Free Frazzle Friday, every Friday through June at participating locations. They're celebrating Free Frazzle Friday at Holiday Oil, Maverick, Top Stop, and many other convenience stores. Limit one per person, but load up the car, bring the kids. Everybody gets a 12-ounce Frazzle free. For locations and more, get the Frazzle app or go to freefrazzlefriday.com. Maybe you love Georgia Peach or Tangerango. You're going to love the Frazzle flavors.
I can't wait for what's next. Even with higher stroke risk due to atrial fibrillation and irregular heartbeat not caused by a heart valve problem, Eliquis, the Pixaban tablets, reduces stroke risk. It's the #1 cardiologist prescribed blood thinner.
Don't stop taking prescription Eliquis without talking to your doctor, as this may increase your risk of stroke. Eliquis can cause serious and, in rare cases, fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve, abnormal bleeding, or have antiphospholipid syndrome. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. A spinal injection while on Eliquis increases risk of blood clots, which may cause paralysis, the inability to move. Get medical help right away for unexpected bleeding or unusual bruising, or if you have tingling, numbness, or muscle weakness. It may increase your bleeding risk if you take medicines such as aspirin products, NSAIDs, SSRIs, SNRIs, and blood thinners. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures. Learn more at Eliquis.com or call 1-855-ELIQUIS.
If something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. There's a particular time of life this phrase couldn't be more appropriate. How can you know you'll live the retirement you've always imagined? After all, life can be so unpredictable. You've worked hard and saved. Watch your accounts go up and down with the market. Your advisor says, don't worry, you'll be just fine. But you still don't feel confident. Utah's retirement specialist, Capital Wealth Advisors, has a checklist to help you find out if you're on the right track for retirement. Take their checklist challenge. If you can check all the boxes on this list with confidence, you may be ready for retirement. If not, the team at Capital Wealth Advisors can help you address any potential costly mistakes. To get your copy of this free guide, go to retireutah.com. That's retireutah.com. Firm offers insurance services. Advisory services offered through Capital Wealth Advisors, LLC, a state of Utah registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Attention smart homeowners. You don't have to fall for flashy promises and companies that don't even prove their work. At Your Service Pros uses third-party verification software called MeasureQuick to ensure your new HVAC system is installed correctly. This ultimate game changer in the HVAC industry lets you, the homeowner, have proof of how your system was installed. At Your Service Pros utilizes our Bluetooth tools to upload all of your system's information into MeasureQuick. We rely on data-driven insights to properly commission, optimize, and fine-tune your HVAC system for peak performance, improving your family's comfort, lowering your utility bills, and extending the life of your HVAC system. With rebates and tax credits available totaling more than $7,500 on a dual fuel heating and cooling system, it is now more important than ever that your HVAC system be installed correctly. So call us today at 801-YOUR-PRO. That's 801-YOUR-PRO. Have the peace of mind of saving up to 50% on your new system and knowing it's installed correctly by calling 801-YOUR-PRO.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, there is a kind of mosquito found in Utah that could potentially carry malaria, but there's never been a recorded outbreak here. Second, one of UDOT's big projects this summer will be a rebuild of 90th South from Sandy to West Jordan. Third, an Amtrak train is derailed near Ventura, California. At least one person reported injured there. Right now, 76 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
So you remember when it was a big topic that the federal government was going to forgive student loans, and then they weren't going to forgive student loans, and then they were going to forgive student loans, and then after a while they weren't going to forgive student loans, and eventually a lot of us just sort of stopped paying attention to that and wake me up when you've got a final decision on this. Well, I don't think anybody could be blamed if you don't remember where we are in that process, because I don't think I remember where we are in that process. But in October, the Biden administration announced that student loan repayments will resume. Let me say that better. The Biden administration has announced that student loan repayments will resume in October. So after 3 years of suspended payments, there's likely to be confusion, chaos, people who've gone, wait, were they forgiven? Were they not forgiven? Do I need to pay? When do I need to pay? Just think about hitting pause on a system like that, indicating to people that they weren't going to have to pay back, but then all of a sudden restarting that they do have to pay it back, and then take into account the general inability of the federal government to communicate clearly on anything. And you can just tell we're heading for kind of a messy process here. But there's a new bill, and it's proposed by Representative Burgess Owens and some of his colleagues in the U.S. House of Representatives that hopes to make that transition back to payments a little bit smoother and easier for people who are going to go through that. Preston Cooper is a research fellow at the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity, working on higher education. Preston, thanks for helping us sort this out for our listeners who may have some outstanding student debt and trying to figure out what they're going to do next. We appreciate you being with us. Let's start here. What is the FAIR Act, the FAIR, the FAIR Act?
So thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be back on the show. So the FAIR Act it's a bill introduced by Representative Burgess Owens and a few of his Republican colleagues in the House. And basically, this bill would try to incentivize student borrowers to make more progress paying down their loans. And it would do that through a combination of factors. Basically, it would streamline the complex array of repayment options that student borrowers face right now. Right now, you try to repay your student loans, you can choose from 10, 11 different repayment plans. It's going to pare those down to 2. And second of all, it's also going to provide new interest subsidies for borrowers who are trying to repay their loans. Because right now, a big frustration for borrowers is they pay, the scheduled payments on their loans year after year, month after month, and they don't see their balance go down. That's because interest keeps accumulating, even though they're making payments. And so basically, the Burgess Owens bill would say, student borrowers, if you are making payments on your loans every month, you're making positive payments, we're going to give you a little bit of extra help by not charging quite as much interest and ensuring that at least part of your payment is going to go to your principal, so that if you are keeping up with your payments, you're going to pay down your loan over time. And I think this is sort of intended as an alternative to the Biden mass student loan forgiveness, in which they're saying, we're going to just forgive $10,000, $20,000, willy-nilly. This is going to require borrowers to make some payments on their loans, but they are going to get a little bit of extra help if they do so.
Yeah. Streamlining is an interesting element of this, that you take something that has maybe 11 choices, and I guess if you understand all 11 choices and they're very clear, that might be advantageous to some. But usually when you get past like 4 or 5 options, the science and the psychology will tell you that gets more difficult for people to make a decision, let alone the right decision or the decision that's best for them. So paring it down to a couple of plans seems like a really key element to this, especially if you can say, hey, you know how you're making a $100 payment, for example, but with interest, you went up $125, so you paid $100, but you fell $25 more behind. To simplify the math on that, that's a really tough situation to put a lot of people in.
That's exactly right. And I think that's really at the heart of a lot of the frustration with the student loan program right now. The federal government comes in and says, well, students' payments are unaffordable, so let's cut their payments. And then students say, yay, I have an affordable payment. But the problem is that payment doesn't cover interest. So they keep paying their loans month after month, and they see their balance go up because they're accumulating more interest than they're paying down. It can feel like you're throwing money into the fire. So I think what the Republican bill is doing here is very smart. It's trying to fix that problem. It's saying, borrowers, if you're making a good faith effort to pay back your loans, we're going to make sure that your principal does go down over time. We're going to make sure that that balance is trending towards zero, which is, I think, going to give borrowers some more confidence that they're actually going to discharge these obligations eventually, and they're not just going to be stuck in an interest trap forever and ever.
Yeah. Any plan that's put out by either party is going to have the other party poking holes in it. So what right now are people saying are the shortcomings or the flaws with this particular idea or piece of legislation?
Well, I think the Democrats, of course, will not want to get on board with any kind of legislation that doesn't just forgive student loans. But I really do think that they should come to the table on this, because this is a very good faith proposal to say to borrowers, if you're going to buy into the system, if you're going to make payments on your loans, we're going to give you some extra help. And it's something that I think Democrats should very much be for. I think the proposal may also face a little bit of resistance from the right, though, because, this is a new benefit. It's a new interest subsidy. It's going to be expensive. But I think that, the authors of the bill can fix that issue by trying to pair it with some common sense limitations on new borrowing. So say, hey, we're going to offer you these interest subsidies, but we're also going to limit how much you can borrow so that your interest is not going to get, way out of control.
Yeah.
And I think that would be, a common sense addition to the bill that would make it more fiscally responsible.
Yeah. If we gave you the magic wand, you've suggested a couple things that could be tweaked there if the two parties were able to come together and negotiate to a nice middle ground. If we gave you the magic wand, though, Preston, how would you go about this? What would you recommend as someone with some policy chops in this area?
Sure. Well, I think that this alone is a very great proposal, but I think what's really missing from this conversation is why do so many borrowers struggle to repay their student loans? And the reason is that sometimes the education they got from colleges simply isn't worth a whole lot in the labor market. Colleges are peddling a lot of degrees that simply aren't worth very much, or they cost too much for too little value. And so in addition to these changes to make student loan repayment more bearable, I would say, hey, we need to stop giving out so many of these loans that are going to go bad in the future. And I would do that by making colleges responsible for a portion of unpaid student loans, so that if you charge $180,000 for a degree and students are only earning $30,000 or $40,000 in the labor market when they come out, the college should be responsible for whatever portion of the loan those students are not able to pay back, which will be a strong disincentive for colleges to offer these degrees that just aren't worth anything.
Yeah, introducing market forces all around makes a lot of sense. No matter how you look at it, everybody should have some skin in the game, not just the students, not just the government, and not just the universities, but if everyone's in it to some extent, then you get there. I want to talk timing real quickly. We have about 30 seconds left, but let's say that, hey, this is a great idea. Let's say that the parties can come together and kind of negotiate it out. Is this something that can get done ahead of the time that everyone has to start making payments again?
Well, they really got to move fast. I think that's the purpose of the bill, is to say this is a way to make the transition back into repayment more seamless, to say, borrowers, you haven't been paying your loans for 3 years. We know it's going to be tough to start payments again, but here's a little bit of an extra incentive to get going on your payments and to make sure that you're making your payments every month. So I really hope that Congress does move fast on this bill, because time is really of the essence.
Excellent. Preston Cooper, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity, working on higher education. We really appreciate your insight on this, and we'll see how this moves forward.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, we've got a discussion about that pesky challenger on the Democratic side of the presidential ticket, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s poll numbers, and why they're dividing Democrats ahead of his town hall tonight. Stay with us.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour. Salt Lake City's mayor says drone shows in the sky will replace the city's fireworks shows in some areas to celebrate the 4th and 24th of July this summer.
We canceled some of the fireworks shows in the past, restricted personal fireworks. And so we'd made this decision about the drone shows some time ago, before we necessarily knew we were going to have an epic winter and a really cool and somewhat wet summer.
Aaron Mendenhall tells Utah's Morning News the drone shows will also help cut down on the air pollution that comes along with fireworks. The first drone show will be Saturday night at Jordan Park. The second, July 24th at Liberty Park. Both shows begin at 10 p.m. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Like millions of Americans, President Biden uses a CPAP machine to treat his sleep apnea. The White House made that announcement today, and ABC's Andy Field explains why.
As he left the White House, reporters saw visible CPAP machine marks on the president's face. His press aides then announced Mr. Biden routinely uses continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP masks, to make sure he gets enough oxygen while he sleeps. The president has had a number of sinus and nasal surgeries to help relieve the symptoms.
Your money at this moment, at the close of trading, the Dow Jones average was down 74 points today. The S&P down just 1.5, and the NASDAQ down 36 points today. Our KSL weather looks like possibility for another thunderstorm before things dry out. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
For adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis who are candidates for systemic or phototherapy, now there's Skyrizi, Risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection. With Skyrizi, 3 out of 4 people achieve 90% clear skin at 4 months, and Skyrizi is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Nothing in me go hand in hand. Nothing on my skin, that's my new plan. Nothing is everything.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
With Skyrizi, you could achieve 90% clearer skin. Ask your doctor about the #1 dermatologist prescribed biologic in psoriasis and visit skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKYRIZI to learn more.
Utah's most fun rodeo rides back to town July 13, 14, 15, 8 p.m. each evening, Juab County Fairgrounds. Flying U Rodeo, the legendary Flying U will bring the livestock. Matt Merritt there to entertain. 15-time Act of the Year, John Payne, the one-armed bandit, and the excitement of Manu, the bull jumper. All put together around parades, breakfast in the park, a fun week where Nephi will see you at the Ute Stampede.
Register for breaking news updates by texting the word news to the Cypress Credit Union KSL text line at 57500.
Dave and Dujanovic.
One of the best ways to get listeners involved in the conversation is to have a clear opinion.
Listener participation. We invite phone calls all the time, and Dave and we're learning things from them too.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We still have a mess up north in Weber and Davis County, even though the crashes have pretty much been cleaned out of the way on I-15, both directions near 5600 South Roy. We have residual backups on the northbound side of I-15. Slowdowns still go from Hill Air Force Base up to 5600 South and Roy, and then southbound I-15 from just before Riverdale Road down to 5600 South. Our other hot spot. This is a fatal accident, and it's still going to be a couple of hours before this is cleared in Taylorsville. We have an accident at the top of the on-ramp and into the main flow of northbound I-215's west belt at 4700 South. This is a spot you need to avoid and take an alternate route. Cedar City, where summer meets adventure. Enjoy live entertainment with the Shakespeare Festival, shopping, dining, museums, hiking, biking, disc golf, and camping under a starry sky. Level up your adventure. Visit cedarcity.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a chance of thunderstorms today and tomorrow with a high around 84. It'll warm up through the rest of the week with highs in the upper 90s by Monday. And right now, 79 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
All right, Marty Carpenter sitting in for Boyd Matheson today, and tonight, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will participate in his first publicly televised town hall hosted by News Nation. He's the 2024 candidate who has stirred up a good amount of controversy on the left because the Democrats, hey, you're supposed to be on cruise control. You have an incumbent president. Yeah, he's pretty old, but that's your guy, and you should be cruising toward how do we best position him to win re-election. It's a little more complicated than that because Democrats were never all that in love with Joe Biden as a candidate, and in any of the times that he ran for president, including the time when he won the presidency. And if you think back about this, like there aren't that many instances in recent U.S. history. Certainly in my lifetime, there's not. There's not one in my lifetime. A couple years before I was born, of course, you had the incumbent. Gerald Ford in 1976 running for his first, what would have been his term, but was challenged by President, the one who went on to become, he wasn't president then, he was challenged by Governor Ronald Reagan. And that one went all the way to the convention. So now you've got a challenger, someone out there kind of kicking up some dust and gaining some traction in the polls as a potential alternative to Joe Biden, and that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he's starting to get some attention, but it is dividing people on the left about which way should we go. Niall Stanage is the associate editor of The Hill and the political contributor for News Nation. Again, I mentioned News Nation is going to host this town hall tonight, or this discussion with RFK Jr. Niall, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Great to be here, Marty.
All right, so tell me this. Why is Robert F. Kennedy polling so well, not super well, but better than expected, and how nervous are they on the left on this?
He clearly has surpassed expectations in these opinion polls. As you say, it's not that he's like 40, 50%, but he's at 15, 20%, which is much stronger than most people had expected. I think there are a couple of reasons. One, which you have already alluded to in your introduction, Marty, and that is a lack of real enthusiasm for President Biden, even among many Democrats. Not that it's all to do with the age issue, but clearly if President Biden won a second term, he would be 86 by the end of that second term, and that gives a lot of people pause. Clearly the Kennedy name is part of this picture as well. People are drawn to that, especially older Democratic voters. And then I think the third point is, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is, well, he's clearly a very controversial figure. He is an unorthodox figure. And we know that in both parties there is at least some appetite for that, though, of course, we'll have to see how deep the appetite is and how far that takes him.
Yeah, we opened our show about an hour and a half ago talking about a big decision that the Biden campaign had to make, and they went out and kind of doubled down on running on the economy. That's one big decision that they faced. Another one now is how do they deal with this challenger? Do they ignore him? Do they engage him? What are people telling President Biden about how to deal with him, and what do you think is the right way to go about it?
So helpfully, I wrote about this approximately a week ago, and what I found in my reporting was that the consensus among Democratic strategists and people in the Democratic Party is that the White House would be better ignoring Kennedy to the extent that they can, because the argument runs that if you engage him, even by attacking him, you in a sense are giving credibility to his challenge. Even attacks on him sort of elevate him because he becomes worthy of attack. The argument against that is if you ignore him, does he, putter along at 15 or 20% higher than Biden Democrats would like, but not at a kind of level that would pose any really serious danger to the president's hopes of winning the Democratic nomination, of course, and then going on to a second term.
Do you think they set a number internally and say, at 15, we don't engage. At 20, we don't engage. At 35, we engage. And by then, do they run the risk of it being too late to go, squash a threat?
Yeah, I mean, that is a potential possibility, at least. If he were to get to 35%, then that does pose real challenges for the White House. It also makes it more difficult to decline to debate him. Now, you were mentioning the Ford-Reagan example. A couple of examples after that were Ted Kennedy challenging President Carter in 1980, and then Pat Buchanan challenging President George H. Bush in 1992. In neither of those cases did the incumbent president debate the challenger from within his own party. So the White House now can lean on those precedents to a certain extent. It's also worth mentioning, though, that while the incumbent president in both those cases rebuffed the challenger, they went on to lose the presidential election in that November. So that's not a very good precursor from President Biden's standpoint.
One of the challenges that the Biden ticket has dealt with, and at least there have been some rumors, discussions, maybe not super serious discussions, but a lot of people think that Vice President Harris is more of a liability than an asset to him in some ways. Is there any way that this ends up with a new Biden-Kennedy ticket, and maybe they say, hey, let's deal with the threat, let's pick up someone who maybe we'd have a little more confidence in helping us on the ticket as we get into a general election?
It's an intriguing scenario, but I honestly doubt it for one particularly simple reason. You're quite right to say that some people do worry that Vice President Harris is a liability or a drag on President Biden's hopes for a second term. But the danger is, particularly given the coalition that creates support for the Democratic Party, dumping a black woman off a ticket is very, very politically perilous. I don't think they would do it to install Robert F. Kennedy in any event, but you would alienate, I think, such a key voting bloc for the Democratic Party if you dumped Harris, that I just don't think it is a viable strategy, even though the misgivings that you alluded to are quite widespread, I would say.
Yeah, it feels like the best strategy is probably steady as she goes, and let's hope that this gets taken care of by itself, because everything else just draws more attention to it. So that does make a lot of sense to me. What should voters be listening for during tonight's town hall? Or what do you think is the message that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants to deliver for an audience tonight?
Well, it's a great question. I should just plug the event again, because people should certainly tune in Mountain Time, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. on News Nation. Now, in relation to what he wants to appeal to, I think the key question is, does he want to make a really serious run at the Democratic nomination, or does he simply want to amplify his own views and get an audience for those views? If it's the first, I think he needs to broaden his appeal and prove to Democratic primary voters that he is legitimately a Democrat. And he has some means to do that. He's a big supporter of labor unions, for example, which hasn't got much attention. He was an environmental lawyer. That hasn't got much attention because of how controversial his views on vaccines are. If, on the other hand, he just wants to be a kind of iconoclast, then he can say more or less whatever he likes and hit the status quo, whether that be President Biden or the political or medical establishment more generally. And the imperative in that case to reach out beyond those people who are already supporting him is less obvious.
Niall Stanage is the associate editor of The Hill and a political contributor to News Nation. We appreciate your insight on this, and we'll be watching tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. That coming up at 9 o'clock tonight on News Nation. We're back with more on Inside Sources after this.
Quality, speed, value for your money, and $1,000 off any roof replacement. That's the IWC advantage. IWC, Intermountain West Contractors, delivers on the things most important to you when it comes time to replace your roof. There could be a dozen different reasons why your roof needs replacement, but just one answer to the problem: IWC. With IWC, you get quality because roof replacement is their specialty, and each job comes complete with the best warranties from the most trusted roofing material manufacturer in America. You get speed because IWC understands your time is valuable. In most cases, they can replace an entire roof in just one day. And with IWC, there's the value of knowing they use top-tier quality materials in every installation and deliver it all at an affordable price. And now, for a limited time, save $1,000 on a roof replacement project. Visit IWCroofing.com or call 801-232-5690. That's 801-232-5690.
Men who have given up in their intimate life because of prostate issues, testicular cancer, or simply no ED treatments you've tried have worked. It's not the end. At Summit Men's Health, they have a customized approach for each individual patient to get results they desire and deserve. Stop wasting your time and money with treatments that don't work for most men, like Shockwave, Viagra, or the shots. Summit Men's Health guarantees results in your first visit, or you don't pay. Call Summit Men's Health today and get the spark back in your relationship. Summit Men's Health, 435-500-2790. They're so confident this will work for you, they promise if you don't get results on your first visit, they pay you $500 cash, no questions asked. Call Summit Men's Health today at 435-500-2790. That's 435-500-2790 to get the passion back in your love life.
Do you have an IRA or 401k? It's natural to think of this as being your money, right? But remember, you still have to pay taxes when you withdraw this money in retirement. And you could be paying a lot more in taxes on these accounts than you know. A lot more. Learn the strategies that can help you reduce or eliminate your taxes in retirement. Don't miss a special edition of Retirement Solutions Radio this Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here on KSL News Radio 1027.
Mom and Dad used to argue about everything, especially about Dad's drinking. It drove me crazy. It got so bad, I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't concentrate. I absolutely refused to let any of my friends come to our house for any reason. I would have been humiliated if anyone found out how much my dad drank and how loud my mom screamed at him. My family went from totally crazy to quiet, calm, and even peaceful. The only thing that happened is my mom started going to Al-Anon family groups. Her relationship with my dad really changed. I asked Mom if she would take me to her Al-Anon meetings or to Alateen. I wanted to see if I could have a better relationship with my dad. I'm sure glad I did. If someone's drinking troubling you, you might be surprised at what you can learn in an Al-Anon or Alateen family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-ALANON or go to alanon.org.
Email from school about the incident today.
Scary.
You know, teachers like me, parents, we don't always know as much as you guys do about what's going on with other kids.
Half the time, it's rumors.
Yeah, but if you're ever concerned about a friend who's having trouble with alcohol, prescription drugs, anything, you need to tell an adult, someone you know and trust. That can be hard, but speaking up about a problem is what helping a friend is all about.
For more information, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Any Hour Services can help unclog any drain in your house, whether you have a backup, a clog, or a slow drain you want fixed. Call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
Tim and Amanda.
If this is the first time you've ever joined us, can we just say welcome, welcome? I hope you come back and see us again. Tim and I have been doing this for a long time, and we love what we do. But the best part of what we do always and will always be connecting with you.
How many times do we say people don't understand how much information and really love we get from that side of the radio?
Yes.
They thank us for giving it to them, but we get it back so many times.
Wake up with Utah's Morning News with Tim and Amanda, 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Salt Lake City's mayor looking forward to drone displays in the sky instead of fireworks this year. Second, leaders of Utah's Republican Party are standing by the candidate who won a place on the ballot in its convention, even though some party members questioned her residency and voting record. Third, those marks on President Biden's face come from a CPAP mask. The White House says the 80-year-old president uses one like millions of other Americans. Right now, 79 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
All right, we're in the home stretch. Taking over for Boyd for the day. We've got one segment left, and let's talk about like the actual big thing that's going on in Utah politics right now, and that's the Congressional District 2 campaigns, the election, the hubbub over what's happened at the convention, trying to figure out who would be the party's official nominee while other candidates are out gathering signatures. There's a whole lot going on, and I guess in some ways it's nice to have something to talk about at this time of year when otherwise it's sort of a dead point on the political calendar. But there's a whole lot that's going down. So Derek Brown has agreed to join us. He's the former chairman of the Utah GOP. He's also a co-host regularly on KSL at night. Derek, let's start here. How much do you miss being the chair of the party right now?
That's like, I think, asking someone how much they miss having a root canal.
Yeah.
It's a rough job, and the current chairman of the Republican Party, I don't think he's gotten much sleep in the last month and a half. So it's kind of a thankless job, but it's one where you can make an impact. And I don't think most people realize that the chairs of the parties it is not a paid position. So we jokingly call it a full-time volunteer position.
Yeah. So the party has come out, and if not officially, has sort of made public the statement that they're going to support Celeste in her, I don't know I guess you'd call it the nomination. She's taken sort of their official nomination from the party, Celeste Malloy has. So I'm just wondering, how does the party get to that decision? How much discussion goes on? Can you just take us behind the scenes a little bit about what may have been going on there, as best you would know from your experience?
Now, are you talking about currently right now, or like leading up to the convention and her victory?
I would say like coming out of the convention, right? So she wins, and then the next thing you know, there's a whole lot of people questioning whether or not she was a registered Republican, had filed the right way, and she was had all the boxes checked and all of her ducks in a row. When something like that pops up, and you're the party chair, what's the way that you would go about it?
Well, you've got to make sure that she complied with the party requirements. And a lot of these questions, a lot of it stems from the fact that there are people saying she wasn't a registered Republican. She's a lifelong Republican. I mean, she was the vice chair of the Washington County Republican Party, working for a Republican member of Congress. And what happens is if you don't vote in two different federal elections, then your registration status becomes inactive. And then her status with the Republican Party became inactive. And so I think the bottom line is the time to address these issues as a party is before she wins the convention. And really that wasn't brought up. So at this point, I think, as the current chair of the Republican Party has done a good job of sort of highlighting here are the issues. But I think when push comes to shove, they'll simply submit her name as the winner of the convention. And then it will sort of, it'll go from there. But anyway, it's a fascinating sort of inside ball game kind of thing. And but I think regardless, I think Celeste Malloy will have the support of the party that elected her last Saturday.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think it'll all get handled, right? And she'll end up, I think, being the nominee, the official choice of the party. Meanwhile, on the other side of that, for those who did go to convention but didn't walk away with that status, they're out gathering signatures right now in a very difficult time of the year to be maybe trying to gather signatures. People on vacation, it might be tough to run some people down. I think that the consensus would be Becky Edwards probably has the apparatus in place to go get the signatures that she needs to, because she just did this last year. And I would think that most people would say Bruce Huff will be able to go get the signatures. Do you think those will likely be the only two who get the signatures, or will we have a field that's more than three people?
My guess is just the two of them. I know both of them well. They're both good friends. And Marty, you're exactly right. One of Becky's strengths is that she's got an apparatus in place. So she doesn't have to sort of reinvent the wheel. She's already got the mechanism to do that, and she's proven that she's a good fundraiser. So I think she'll do that. Bruce is someone that in the political circles is known well. He's been the national committeeman for the Republican Party for many years, and so also someone I think who has access to be able to do that. So it's the signature gathering deadline is July 5th, and so they've got to collect 7,000 signatures, and as you know, the reality is you've got to collect more like 9,000 or 10,000 because there's specific requirements, right? They've got to live in the district. And if they don't, then it gets thrown out. And if it gets thrown out after the deadline, you're too late. Yeah. So I think what we'll see is three candidates in a primary for the Republicans against whoever it is the Democrats select tonight.
So let's walk through what that three-person hypothetical field would look like with those particular candidates. How does each one want to position himself or herself in that race to say, I think if you're Celeste Malloy, you say, hey, I worked for Congressman Stewart. I helped support his policies while I was there. You're going to get a lot of the same of what you voted for a year ago with me. Becky Edwards ran most recently against Senator Mike Lee, and she did that in the sense of, hey, we need new blood. We need some new people there, new ideas. And then Bruce Huff, we don't know as much about because he doesn't have that history as a candidate. I'm just wondering, how do you see each of them positioning themselves to best go out and win the race?
Well, I think you're going to see both Celeste and Becky at kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. Her positioning will be as the person who is the official party nominee of sorts. I mean, she won the convention. And, the signature gathering, both of these, and the other two, Becky and Bruce, were at convention and participated, but didn't even register in terms of the number. I don't even know the number of votes they got, but it was de minimis. I mean, they hardly got any. And so Celeste will basically say, in terms of the official Republican Party, I'm the person. And then Marty, as you mentioned, for her, not only having worked for Congressman Stewart, but received his endorsement. I mean, that's something that I think she'll play up as well. Mm-hmm. Now, I think Becky will say, look, for those of you who, think that you're more of a moderate or more of the, in the Mitt Romney camp, I'm really the one that you need to be voting for. And so I think they'll play off each other in that sense. I mean, Becky could use some of these registration issues that Celeste is having now against her, but I don't know. I mean, I don't see her doing that. I think you see the two of them kind of the major candidates, and then Bruce trying to pick up folks who don't like either of them. So the question is, and I haven't seen any polling, I don't know if anyone's done anything yet, but it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, because my sense is it's still probably the official Republican. I think it probably is Celeste in the end. But in in a special election like this, it'll be interesting to see, how what turnout is.
Yeah, I think the calendar plays into this more than any other time in recent elections, because not only is it an off year, you're not really expecting to vote in a House race right now. The calendar shifted a bit because of when the resignation came. And it just seems to me that of all the recent elections, this is the one where you're going to be most advantaged to be able to say, hey, the party delegates, the diehards, they are the ones who support me. That gives you some indication that you're going to have support from those who are most likely to turn out and vote. I got about 30 seconds for you to react to that.
No, I think that's exactly the right point, because when you have sort of these special elections or elections that take place at times that are not sort of the predictable ones, the more engaged members of the party are the ones more likely to vote. And so that's why if I had to handicap it, I'd say Celeste is likely going to win.
All right, Derek, they're playing our song. That means it's time for us to wrap up. I appreciate you jumping in here to give us your insight on what's going on in CD2. Certainly there's been more action than we expected, and we'll keep an eye on it. It's been great to be with you on Inside Sources.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
Good afternoon, 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Kaplan. 78